The mining colony on Kepler 442b was supposed to be safe. That's what Marcus Chen told his daughter every night before bed. The xenobiologist had sworn the planet was uninhabited, just rocks and minerals waiting to be harvested. They were wrong. Marcus stood at the edge of the settlement, watching the twin suns set behind jagged mountains. His military days were behind him, or so he'd thought. 20 years of service in Earth's colonial defense force had earned him this quiet retirement. A simple job as head of security for a mining operation, with his 12-year-old daughter Lily by his side. The first sign of trouble came 3 weeks after they'd broken ground. Equipment started disappearing, not breaking down or getting misplaced, vanishing entirely. Massive drilling rigs that weighed several tons would be there at sunset and gone by dawn. No tracks, no debris, nothing. "Dad, I'm scared," Lily had whispered one night, clutching her worn stuffed rabbit. The same rabbit he'd given her after her mother died 5 years ago. "Nothing to be scared of, sweetheart," Marcus replied, though his hand instinctively moved to where his sidearm used to rest. Old habits died hard. The colony administrator, a thin man named Garrett, dismissed the concerns. "Probably just sinkholes," he said during the morning briefing. "This planet's geology is still being mapped." But Marcus knew better. Sinkholes didn't selectively swallow mining equipment while leaving the ground perfectly intact. His soldier's instincts, dormant for years, began stirring. He started sleeping lighter, keeping his work boots by the bed, ready to move at a moment's notice. Then, the Korthax arrived. They came during the artificial night cycle, when the colony's lights dimmed to simulate Earth's day-night pattern. Marcus was making his rounds when he saw them, tall, crystalline beings that seemed to shift between solid and liquid states. Their bodies reflected the colony lights in prismatic patterns that hurt to look at directly. The first human they encountered was a young geologist named Pavel. The Korthax didn't speak. They communicated through harmonics that made human teeth ache. Their message was clear enough: leave. Now. Pavel, terrified and alone, had run. The Korthax let him go, their forms rippling with what might have been satisfaction. Word spread quickly through the colony. Panic set in. "We need to evacuate," Administrator Garrett announced, his voice shaking. "The company will send ships—" "The nearest ship is 3 months away," Marcus interrupted. He'd already checked. "We can't wait that long." The Korthax gave them 7 days, 7 days to dismantle everything and leave. It was impossible, and everyone knew it. Some colonists started packing anyway, desperately trying to fit their lives into shipping containers. Others sat in stunned silence, unable to process that their new home was being taken from them. Marcus spent those days studying the Korthax from a distance. They moved through the colony's perimeter like sentinels, never entering but always watching. He noticed patterns in their movements, weaknesses in their formations. The soldier in him was mapping tactics, even as the father in him worried about Lily. On the 6th night, everything changed. A young couple, the Petrovs, tried to sneak past the Korthax line with their infant son. Maybe they thought they could reach the emergency beacon on the far ridge, or maybe desperation had clouded their judgment. The Korthax stopped them with a wall of crystalline bodies. Mrs. Petrov, holding her baby, had pleaded. Mr. Petrov had begged. The baby cried. And then one of the Korthax, a particularly large one with deep purple striations through its form, had reached for the child. That's when Marcus arrived. He'd been tracking the Petrovs, trying to stop them before they did something foolish, but seeing that alien appendage extending toward a human baby triggered something primal in him. Without thinking, he stepped between the Korthax and the family. "No," he said simply. The Korthax's harmonics increased, creating a sound like grinding glass. Its message was clear: "Move aside, human." "No," Marcus repeated, his stance widening. 20 years of combat training locked his body into position. He might not have his rifle or his squad, but he was still a soldier, still a father, still human. The Korthax shifted, its form becoming more solid, more threatening. Around them, other Korthax began to converge. The Petrovs cowered behind Marcus, the baby's cries echoing in the night. That's when Lily appeared. She shouldn't have been there. Marcus had told her to stay in their quarters, to lock the door and wait for him. But she'd followed him, as daughters sometimes do when they sense their fathers are in danger. "Dad?" Her voice was small, frightened. The purple-striped Korthax turned its attention to her. Something in its resonance changed. A note of interest, perhaps curiosity. It began moving toward her. Marcus didn't remember crossing the distance. One moment, he was shielding the Petrovs. The next, his open palm connected with what passed for the Korthax's face. The slap echoed across the settlement like a gunshot. Everything stopped. The Korthax's form rippled, frozen between states. The other aliens halted their approach. Even the baby stopped crying. In that moment of absolute silence, Marcus stood between his daughter and an alien force that could probably tear him apart at the molecular level. But he didn't move, didn't flinch, didn't blink. The purple-striped Korthax slowly reformed, its harmonics now carrying something that might have been surprise. Or respect. It had been millennia since anyone had dared strike a Korthax. Their reputation as an elder race, as beings who had mastered space travel when humans were still learning to use fire, preceded them across the galaxy. Yet here stood a single human, hand still raised, ready to fight a battle he couldn't possibly win. Not for glory or conquest, but for something the Korthax had long forgotten: protecting the young. The standoff stretched. Other colonists, drawn by the commotion, began gathering at the edges of the scene. They saw Marcus Chen, former sergeant in the Colonial Defense Force, current single father, standing alone against beings that could reduce him to atoms. The Korthax communed among themselves, their harmonics creating a symphony of discussion. Marcus kept his eyes on the purple-striped one, which seemed to be their leader. His message was clear without words. "You'll have to go through me." Finally, the lead Korthax moved. Not toward Lily or the Petrovs, but to the side, creating space. Its harmonics shifted to something almost like a question. Dr. Sarah Kim, the colony's xenolinguist, stepped forward hesitantly. I think it's asking why," she said, her translation device working overtime to decode the harmonics. Marcus didn't lower his guard. "Because she's my daughter," he said simply. "Because they're human. Because that's what we do. We protect our own." The Korthax leader's form shifted again, and this time Dr. Kim gasped. It's asking about your offspring. About human offspring. They don't understand why you would risk yourself for something that cannot contribute to your survival." Marcus almost laughed. How could he explain to a crystalline alien what it meant to be a parent? How could he describe the moment Lily was born, when the nurse placed her in his arms and the entire universe suddenly made sense? How could he convey the terror of almost losing her when her mother died, and the fierce joy of watching her grow despite the loss? Instead, he said, "Then they don't understand humans." The colony had gathered now, forming a loose circle around the confrontation. They watched their security chief, not a young man anymore, gray creeping into his black hair, wearing a simple mining colony uniform instead of military armor, standing against impossible odds. And one by one, they stepped forward. First came Dr. Kim, moving to stand beside Marcus. Then the Petrovs, still clutching their baby. Then old Maintenance Chief Murphy and the cafeteria staff and the geological survey team. Even Administrator Garrett, sweating profusely, took his place in the growing line of humans. The Korthax observed this with what could only be described as fascination. Their harmonics grew more complex, layered with questions and observations. They had conquered worlds, driven entire civilizations to extinction or exile. But they had never encountered this. A species that grew stronger when threatened, that united in the face of annihilation. The purple-striped leader approached Marcus again, more slowly this time. It extended an appendage, not threateningly, but almost curiously. Marcus didn't flinch as it stopped inches from his face, close enough that he could see his reflection in its crystalline surface. Then it did something unprecedented. It formed what was unmistakably a hand and held it out, palm up. Dr. Kim's translation device went crazy. It's asking for permission, to understand, through contact. Marcus looked at the offered hand, then back at Lily. His daughter, brave like her mother, nodded. "It's okay, Dad. Sometimes you have to trust." Slowly, carefully, Marcus placed his hand on the Korthax's palm. The contact was electric, overwhelming. Images flooded his mind, not his own memories, but the Korthax's. He saw their homeworld, destroyed eons ago by their own hubris. He saw them wandering the stars, taking what they needed, never understanding why other species fought so hard for chunks of rock and metal. He saw their confusion at human resistance, their inability to comprehend attachment to place and people. But more than that, he felt them experiencing his memories, the joy of holding Lily for the first time, the agony of watching his wife fade away in a hospital bed, the determination to give his daughter a better life among the stars, the simple, powerful love that made a middle-aged ex-soldier stand against the universe itself. When the contact ended, both beings staggered. The Korthax leader's form rippled with new patterns, colors Marcus had never seen before. Around them, the other Korthax began resonating with different harmonics, confused, questioning, almost distressed. Dr. Kim was crying as she translated. They don't have children, not like we do. They reproduce by division, creating exact copies. They've never felt what you just shared." The leader turned to face its kind, harmonics rising and falling in what was clearly an intense debate. Some Korthax flickered angrily, their forms sharp and aggressive. Others seemed contemplative, their patterns flowing with new understanding. As the twin suns began to rise, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, the Korthax reached a decision. The leader approached Marcus once more, its harmonics now carrying something almost like respect. "They want to negotiate," Dr. Kim whispered, her voice filled with awe. "They've never negotiated with anyone before. They want to understand more about why we're the way we are." Marcus nodded, exhaustion suddenly hitting him. The adrenaline was fading, leaving him aware of how close they'd all come to annihilation. "Tell them we'll talk. But they need to understand something first." He gathered Lily into his arms, holding her close as he faced the assembled Korthax. "This colony, these people, we're family now, all of us. You want our resources? Fine, we can discuss trade. You want to understand humans? We'll teach you. But you don't threaten our families. Not ever." The purple-striped Korthax considered this, then did something that would be recorded in history books across human space. It attempted to smile. The expression was wrong, disturbing on its crystalline features, but the intent was clear. The siege of Kepler 442b was over. But something far more important was beginning. The first true communication between humanity and the Korthax. All because a father refused to step aside because a single slap had broken through eons of misunderstanding. As the colonists began to disperse, cautiously optimistic about their future, Lily hugged her father tighter. "Mom would be proud," she whispered. Marcus kissed the top of her head, watching the Korthax organize themselves into what looked like a delegation. "Yeah, sweetheart, I think she would. The negotiations would be complex, the cultural exchanges difficult, and the path forward uncertain. But on a mining colony at the edge of human space, two species had taken the first step toward understanding. And it all started with a father's love, and the courage to stand when walking away would have been easier. The negotiations began in what used to be the colony's recreation center. Someone had pushed the ping-pong tables against the walls and arranged chairs in a circle, humans on one side, Korthax on the other, with a neutral zone in between where Dr. Sarah Kim stood with her translation equipment. Marcus sat at the center of the human delegation, still wearing his security uniform from the night before. He hadn't slept, hadn't eaten, but he couldn't afford to show weakness. Beside him sat Administrator Garrett, hands trembling slightly as he shuffled through data pads. On his other side, Lily occupied herself with a sketch pad, drawing the Korthax with remarkable accuracy for a 12-year-old. The purple-striped Korthax leader, whom the humans had started calling Prism, faced them across the divide. Its form had stabilized since their contact, maintaining an almost humanoid shape that seemed to be its attempt at diplomacy. "They want to know about ownership," Dr. Kim translated. Her voice strained from hours of interpreting harmonic frequencies. "The concept confuses them. They say the planet belongs to itself." Garrett cleared his throat. "Well, according to Colonial Charter 4461, any uninhabited planet—" "Was inhabited," Marcus interrupted quietly. "They were here. We just didn't know how to see them." Prism's form rippled with what might have been approval. Through Dr. Kim, it explained how the Korthax had existed on Kepler 442b for centuries, living within the crystalline cave systems deep underground. The mining operations had disturbed their habitat, forcing them to the surface. "So we're the invaders," Murphy, the maintenance chief, said bluntly. "We came barging in, tearing up their home." The human side of the room shifted uncomfortably. They'd all bought into the narrative of brave colonists taming empty worlds. The reality was more complex. But Prism did something unexpected. It projected images into the air, holographic memories showing Korthax history. World after world where they'd driven out other species, taking what they needed without consideration. Until now. "The small human," Dr. Kim translated, gesturing to Lily. "She changed things. The Protector's memories showed us something we had forgotten, the strength that comes from connection." Lily looked up from her drawing, blushing slightly. She'd added color to her sketch, showing how the light refracted through Prism's body in rainbow patterns. The first day of negotiations established basic ground rules: no violence, no taking without asking. Both species would share the planet, with humans confined to their current settlement area, while the Korthax maintained their underground territories. Mining operations would continue, but under strict guidelines to avoid Korthax regions. It seemed too easy. Marcus's military instincts warned him that nothing ever went this smoothly. He was right. 3 days into the talks, a supply shipment arrived. An automated cargo drone that had been in transit when the crisis began. Among the standard supplies was something that made the Korthax recoil in harmonic screams: weapons. Not many, just the standard security complement for a frontier colony. But to the Korthax, who had experienced human memories of war through Marcus, the crates of pulse rifles and plasma charges represented everything they feared about humanity. Betrayal. The harmonics didn't need translation. Prism's form had gone sharp, jagged, dangerous. Other Korthax emerged from hidden positions around the colony, surrounding the settlement in a crystalline wall. Garrett panicked. "It's just standard equipment. We didn't order extra weapons." But the Korthax weren't listening. Their harmonics rose to painful levels, causing humans to cover their ears. Windows cracked. Electronic devices sparked and failed. Marcus stood slowly, hands visible and empty. He walked to the weapon crates, feeling the weight of every eye, human and Korthax, upon him. Then he did something that would either save them all or sign their death warrant. He opened the first crate, pulled out a pulse rifle, and handed it to Prism. The harmonics stopped. The silence was deafening. "You want to understand humans?" Marcus said quietly. "Then understand this. We make weapons, yes. We've used them on each other, on other species, on worlds themselves. But we also choose when not to use them." He opened the remaining crates, laying the weapons out in the space between the two groups. "Every human here knows how to use these. We're descended from soldiers, warriors, hunters. It's in our DNA, but look around you." Prism's form shifted, taking in the scene. Human colonists, faced with an alien threat, standing weaponless. Children peeking out from behind their parents. Elderly scientists clutching their research pads instead of guns. "We choose," Marcus continued. "Every day we choose. We choose to build instead of destroy, to talk instead of fight, to trust instead of fear. That's not weakness. That's strength." He stepped back, leaving the weapons in the neutral zone. "Take them if you want. Study them. Destroy them. We don't need them to show you who we are." Lily stood up from her chair, her sketchpad forgotten. She walked past her father, past the weapons, straight up to Prism. The massive alien towered over her, its crystalline form casting rainbow shadows. She held out her hand. "Friends?" she asked simply. The Korthax leader studied this small human, this offspring that by its own species' logic should be helpless, protected, kept away from danger. Yet here she stood, fearless, offering connection to a being that could destroy her with a thought. Slowly, carefully, Prism formed a hand-like appendage and took Lily's tiny fingers in its grasp. The image would become iconic throughout human space. A 12-year-old girl shaking hands with a crystalline alien. Weapons discarded on the ground between their species, two kinds of beings choosing trust over fear. But the moment was interrupted by alarms. Not from the colony's systems, those were still damaged from the harmonic assault. These came from the Korthax themselves, their forms suddenly agitated, colors shifting to deep reds and violent purples. Dr. Kim struggled with the translation. "Something's coming. They're afraid? No. Concerned. They say, 'The Devourers have found us.'" Space above Kepler 442b rippled. Where there had been stars, now there was darkness, not the absence of light, but something that ate light itself. Ships emerged from fold space, if they could be called ships. They looked more like living wounds in reality, black shapes that hurt to perceive directly. The Vorth, Prism's harmonics carried dread. "We thought we had lost them. They follow us, world to world, consuming." The first Vorth assault pods hit the surface before anyone could react. They landed outside the settlement, disgorging creatures that seemed to be made of pure entropy, patches of nothingness that dissolved whatever they touched. The Korthax moved immediately, forming defensive lines with their crystalline bodies. But where Vorth touched Korthax, the beautiful prismatic beings simply ceased, not destroyed, not shattered, erased. "Get everyone to the shelters," Marcus commanded, his military training kicking in. But he knew it was futile. The colony's shelters were designed for radiation storms, not entities that deleted matter from existence. That's when he saw the weapons still lying in the neutral zone. Marcus had made a career out of impossible decisions. He'd held failing defensive lines, evacuated colonies under fire, made the choice between saving many or saving few. But he'd never faced anything like the Vorth. He grabbed a pulse rifle, checking its charge. Around him, other colonists did the same. Garrett fumbled with a plasma pistol, hands shaking. Murphy hefted a heavy repeater like it weighed nothing. Even Dr. Kim, pacifist to her core, picked up a weapon. "You don't have to do this," Marcus told them. "Like hell we don't," Murphy growled. "These crystal folks are weird, but they're our weird crystal folks now." The first combat engagement between humans and Vorth would be studied by military historians for generations. Not because of brilliant tactics or superior firepower, but because of what happened when human weapons met Vorth entropy. The weapons did nothing. Pulse blasts, plasma bolts, kinetic rounds, all simply vanished into the Vorth's non-existence. The creatures advanced steadily, dissolving ground, buildings, and any Korthax too slow to retreat. But humans had one advantage the Vorth hadn't encountered before: stubbornness. When the weapons failed, Murphy threw his empty repeater at a Vorth. It vanished, but the creature paused, seemingly confused by the gesture. Other humans followed suit, throwing whatever they could find: tools, furniture, even shoes. None of it stopped the Vorth, but it slowed them. And that's when Lily did something that changed everything. She started singing. It was a simple song, one her mother had sung to her years ago, a lullaby about stars and dreams and tomorrow. Her young voice carried across the battlefield, thin but clear. The Vorth stopped. Not paused, not slowed, stopped. The patches of entropy hung in mid-air, vibrating with something like uncertainty. Prism's harmonics joined Lily's song, finding frequencies that complemented the human child's melody. Other Korthax added their voices, creating a symphony of sound and light. "They're beings of destruction," Dr. Kim breathed, understanding flooding her face. "They can only understand destruction, but music, art, creation, it's antithetical to their nature." Marcus dropped his useless rifle and raised his voice, joining his daughter's song. He couldn't carry a tune to save his life, but that didn't matter. Other humans joined in, some with Lily's lullaby, others with songs from their own cultures. The recreation center's damaged speakers crackled to life as someone managed to route music through them. The battlefield became a concert, hundreds of humans and dozens of Korthax, creating a wall of sound and harmony against the forces of entropy. The Vorth writhed, their non-forms flickering. Where sound waves hit them, pieces of reality reasserted themselves. The advancing tide of destruction slowed, stopped, and then began to retreat. But the Vorth ships in orbit weren't affected. They began charging weapons. Not the entropy beams of their ground forces, but something worse. Marcus recognized the energy signature from his military days. Planet crackers. Weapons designed to split worlds in half. "How long until they fire?" he asked Prism through Dr. Kim. "Minutes," came the translated reply. "We have failed. We brought them here. Your deaths are our fault." Marcus looked at his daughter, still singing despite tears streaming down her face. He thought of his wife, of the promise he'd made to keep Lily safe. He'd failed. Then Administrator Garrett, of all people, had an idea. "The quantum transmitter," he shouted over the music. "In my office. It's connected to the colonial network." Marcus understood immediately. If they could broadcast their song, their act of creation beyond the planet. "Everyone who can move, get to the administration building," he ordered. "Keep singing." The journey across the settlement was surreal. Humans and Korthax moved together, maintaining their harmonic shield against the Vorth ground forces. When someone's voice gave out, another took up the melody. When a Korthax's harmonics faltered, a human steadied them with a hand on their crystalline surface. They reached Garrett's office as the Vorth ships finished charging. The planet cracker beam would fire in seconds. Garrett's fingers flew over his console, Murphy and the tech team jury-rigging connections. The quantum transmitter hummed to life, ready to broadcast across light years of space. "What do we send?" Garrett asked desperately. "What represents us? Humanity." Lily stepped forward. In her hand was the sketch pad she'd somehow kept through everything. The drawing of Prism, colored with a child's optimism, showing the Korthax not as a terrifying alien, but as a friend catching the light. "This," she said simply. "All of this." Marcus understood. Not just the drawing, but everything. The video logs of the negotiations, the recordings of human and Korthax standing together. The sound of two species choosing cooperation over conflict. The image of his daughter's small hand in a crystalline grip. They broadcast it all. Every frequency, every channel, a tsunami of data showing the universe what had happened on this small mining world. How a slap had become a handshake. How enemies had become allies. How the most precious thing humans and Korthax had built together wasn't a treaty or a trade agreement, but trust. The planet Cracker fired. The beam lanced down from orbit, a column of pure destruction aimed at the heart of the colony. It would hit in seconds, vaporizing everything and everyone. But between the beam and the planet, the Korthax made their choice. Every Korthax on the planet launched themselves skyward, their crystalline bodies merging, combining, creating a lens of living light. They caught the planet Cracker beam and did what their species did best. They refracted it. The destructive energy scattered into a million harmless rays, painting the sky in aurora colors. But the cost was terrible. Many Korthax shattered under the strain, their forms raining down as crystal dust that caught the light like tears. Prism survived barely. Its form was cracked, diminished, but still holding together as it returned to the ground. "Why?" Marcus asked, supporting the alien leader. "You could have let us die and saved yourselves." "The small one taught us," Prism harmonized weakly. "Family protects family." The Vorth ships hung in orbit, weapons cycling for another shot. But across the colonial network, responses to their broadcast began flooding in. Ships throughout human space were mobilizing. The message had been received. Kepler 442b would not fall alone. But more surprising were the other responses, from species the humans had never encountered, from civilizations that had hidden from the Vorth for millennia, all asking the same question. How had they done it? How had two species stood together against entropy itself? The Vorth, faced with the prospect of fighting not just humans and Korthax, but a coalition of worlds inspired by their stand, made a tactical decision. The wounds in space closed as their ships retreated into fold space, fleeing to find easier prey. They had won. At terrible cost, against impossible odds, they had won. As the twin suns set on the battlefield, humans and Korthax worked together to gather the crystal remains of the fallen. Each fragment was carefully collected, treasured. The Korthax sang morning harmonics, while humans stood in respectful silence. Later, much later, when relief ships arrived to find human and Korthax children playing together in the ruins of the settlement, when xenobiologists came to study the unprecedented alliance, when military strategists tried to understand how singing had defeated entropy, Marcus would think about that moment. A father's slap had started it. A daughter's trust had sealed it, and somewhere between the two, humanity had found its place among the stars, not as conquerors or colonizers, but as the species that stood its ground for family, even when that family had crystalline skin and spoke in harmonics. The rebuilding began immediately. Human construction techniques merged with Korthax crystal growing, creating structures that were both functional and beautiful. The weapons were repurposed into mining tools. The quantum transmitter became a beacon, inviting other species to come and learn. But the most important construction wasn't made of metal or crystal. It was the school where human and Korthax young learned together, where Lily taught art to beings who had never conceived of drawing, where Prism shared the mathematics of light refraction with children who barely understood algebra. One evening, as Marcus watched his daughter helping a young Korthax understand the concept of favorite colors, Prism approached him. "We have a question," it harmonized through Dr. Kim. "About the slap." Marcus chuckled. "Still thinking about that?" "You struck me. By your own laws, I could have demanded justice, retribution. Why did you risk it?" Marcus considered the question, watching Lily laugh as the young Korthax accidentally created a rainbow that filled the room. "Because sometimes," he said finally, You have to shock someone into seeing clearly. You were so focused on being the powerful elder race that you'd forgotten to just be. That slap wasn't about violence. It was about saying, "Wake up and see us." Prism's form rippled with what might have been amusement. It worked. Yeah, Marcus agreed. Though next time, maybe we try talking first. Next time, Prism harmonized, and somehow Marcus could hear the smile in it. The colony thrived. News of the Human-Korthax alliance spread throughout the galaxy, inspiring similar partnerships. Species that had hidden from each other for millennia began tentative communications. The Vorth, finding no easy targets, retreated to the dark spaces between galaxies. And in the center of it all, a mining colony that had become something more. A symbol that different species could stand together, fight together, and build something worth protecting together. All because one human father refused to walk away. 10 years had passed since the day a human father slapped a Korthax leader and changed the galaxy forever. Kepler 442b had transformed from a struggling mining colony into the unofficial capital of interspecies cooperation. The settlement, now called Unity Point, sprawled across the valley in a fusion of human architecture and Korthax crystal formations. Buildings grew as much as they were built, organic curves of living crystal intertwining with human steel and concrete. Marcus Chen stood on the observation deck of the council hall, a structure that would have been impossible without human engineering and Korthax crystal singing working in harmony. His hair had gone completely gray, and new lines creased his face, some from laughter, others from the weight of the responsibilities he'd never asked for, but couldn't refuse. "You're brooding again," a familiar voice said. He turned to find Lily, no longer the 12-year-old who'd extended her hand to an alien. At 22, she'd grown into a confident young woman, serving as Unity Point's youngest cultural liaison. She wore the hybrid uniform they'd developed, human fabric interwoven with Korthax crystal fibers that shifted color with her emotions. "Not brooding," Marcus replied. "Thinking." "Same thing with you." She joined him at the window, looking out at the city below. Human children played with young Korthax in the parks, their laughter mixing with harmonic trills. "The council meeting didn't go well?" Marcus sighed. The Galactic Council, a body that hadn't existed until the Unity Point Accords, was facing its first real crisis. Not from external threats like the Vorth, but from within. "The Altarians want to withdraw," he admitted. "They say we're moving too fast, mixing too much. They want to return to isolation." The Altarians were energy beings who had joined the Alliance 3 years ago, inspired by the Human-Korthax partnership, but integration was harder than inspiration. "Change is scary," Lily said softly. "Remember how long it took before humans stopped flinching when Korthax passed through walls?" Marcus smiled slightly. The early days had been full of cultural misunderstandings. Korthax didn't understand privacy, walking through human homes at will. Humans didn't realize that touching a Korthax during their dormant cycle could cause them pain, but they'd learned, adapted, grown together. A harmonic chime announced someone's arrival. Prism flowed up through the floor, its form more stable now but still bearing the cracks from deflecting the planet cracker years ago. Those scars had become marks of honor among its people. "Marcus, friend," Prism harmonized. It had long ago mastered human speech patterns without needing translation. "The situation grows concerning." "How bad?" Marcus asked. 3 more species consider withdrawal. The Pentari claim humans spread too quickly, influence too much. The Mesh fear losing their hive mind individuality, and the Solarans. Prism's form darkened. "They say the alliance was a mistake." Marcus felt the weight of it all. They'd built something unprecedented. Dozens of species working together, sharing knowledge, growing beyond their limitations. But fear of change, of losing identity, threatened to tear it all apart. "Dad," Lily touched his arm. "What was it you used to tell me? About the hardest battles?" "That they're not fought with weapons," Marcus murmured. Then louder, "Call an emergency assembly. Everyone. Not just council representatives, anyone who wants to come." Prism's harmonics carried uncertainty. "That could be thousands of beings." "Good," Marcus said. "It's time to remind everyone why we started this." The assembly convened in the Great Forum, a natural amphitheater that had been expanded to accommodate multiple species' needs. Water channels for the aquatic ceridians, perches for the winged aviori, crystalline surfaces for the Korthax, and yes, simple chairs for humans. Marcus had never wanted to be a leader. He'd been happy as a security chief, then reluctantly accepted the role of military advisor, and somehow found himself as Unity Point's de facto spokesman. But as he looked out at the gathered beings, thousands of different species who might never have met without their alliance, he knew he had to try. 10 years ago, he began, his voice carried by both human technology and Korthax harmonic amplification, I slapped Prism. Ripples of amusement went through the crowd. The story had become legend, told different ways by different species. I'm not proud of it, Marcus continued. Violence is never the answer, but sometimes a shock is needed to break through assumptions. Today we need a different kind of shock, he gestured to the crowd. Look around you. When in the history of the galaxy has this happened? Predator and prey species sitting together, energy beings and physical beings sharing space, hive minds and individuals exchanging ideas. This shouldn't be possible. But it is. Lily stepped forward, having inherited her father's reluctant leadership. Because we chose to make it possible. Not because it was easy, but because the alternative, isolation, fear, stagnation, was worse. An Altarian rose, its energy form flickering with agitation. You speak of choice, but what of our nature? We are losing ourselves in this mixing. Are you? It was Prism who responded. I have learned human concepts, family, art, sacrifice. Has this made me less Korthax, or more than I was? A Pentari chittered from its section. The humans spread everywhere. Their way of thinking, their emotions, their chaos. And your efficiency has taught us much, Dr. Kim responded. She'd aged gracefully, still serving as chief xenobiologist. Your hive-building techniques revolutionized our construction. Your collective decision-making improved our councils. Exchange goes both ways. But the fears ran deeper than logic could address. Marcus saw it in the way different species had unconsciously segregated themselves in the amphitheater, clustering with their own kind, despite years of integration. That's when the alarms started. The sound was one every being recognized. The deep, thrumming alert that meant only one thing. Vorth. But not from space this time. The sensors indicated something impossible. Vorth signals from beneath the planet's surface. The deep caverns, Prism harmonized in horror. The ones we sealed after first contact. They must have been there all along. Panic rippled through the assembly. If Vorth had been hiding underground for 10 years, learning, adapting, preparing, the ground cracked in the center of the forum. Not the entropy wounds of before, but something worse, Vorth, that had evolved, learned from their defeat. They rose not as patches of nothingness, but as twisted mirrors of the species above, mockeries that reflected and inverted what they touched. A mirror human emerged, its features a dark reflection of humanity's worst impulses. A shadow Korthax followed, its crystalline form drinking light instead of refracting it. Anti-beings of every species present began crawling from the depths. The assembly erupted in chaos. Old instincts took over. Flee, hide, protect only your own. The careful unity of years shattered in seconds as species retreated to their sections, some preparing to fight, others to run. Marcus stood his ground, even as his mirror self approached. It spoke with his voice, twisted and wrong. You failed them all, soldier. Failed your wife, failed your daughter, failed these aliens you pretend to unite. It was his darkest thoughts given form, every doubt and fear he'd carried for years. Around him, others faced their own shadow selves, paralyzed by reflections of their worst aspects. But Lily stepped between Marcus and his dark mirror. You're wrong, she said simply. He didn't fail. He chose to try. The shadow Marcus laughed. And what did trying accomplish? Look around you, girl. They scatter like leaves. There is no unity, only the illusion of it. That's when something remarkable happened. A young Korthax, one of the children who'd grown up in the integrated schools, moved to stand with Lily. Then a human teenager joined them. An Altarian youth pulsed beside them, followed by a young Pentari breaking from its hive group. The children of Unity Point, who had grown up together, who knew no other way than cooperation, began to form a circle in the center of the chaos. You don't scare us, the young Korthax harmonized at the shadows. We've seen scarier things in movie night. Despite the danger, Marcus almost laughed. Lily had instituted cultural exchange through entertainment, and human horror movies had become surprisingly popular among young Korthax. The shadow beings paused, confused. They were reflections of fear and division, but these youth carried neither. They had been raised in unity, and that unity was not just an ideal but their reality. More young beings joined the circle. They linked hands, tentacles, energy fields, whatever they had, and they began to sing. Not one song but many, a cacophony that somehow harmonized. Human pop songs mixed with Korthax light hymns, Pentari work chants blended with Altarian energy pulses. The shadow beings writhed, their forms unstable. They were inversions, but what was the inverse of genuine unity? They couldn't mirror something that had no opposite in their nature. The adults watched in amazement as their children, the first generation to grow up truly integrated, stood against the darkness. And one by one, shame and inspiration moved them to action. Prism was the first adult to join the circle, adding its harmonics to the chaotic chorus. Then Dr. Kim, then Murphy, grumbling about his old bones, then others. The circle grew, encompassing the shadow beings. Marcus stepped forward to face his dark reflection one more time. But now he saw it clearly. Not as some external enemy, but as the part of himself he fought every day. The doubt, the fear, the voice that said he wasn't good enough. You're right, he told the shadow. I did fail, many times, but that's human. We fail, we fall, we get back up. And sometimes, when we're lucky, we don't get back up alone. He extended his hand to the shadow Marcus. Come on then. If you're part of me, let's do this together. The shadow recoiled, then flickered. For a moment, Marcus saw not a dark reflection, but himself, tired, scarred, imperfect, but trying, always trying. The shadow Marcus took his hand. Around the forum, the same scene played out. Beings faced their shadow selves not with violence or denial, but with acceptance. The Altarians acknowledged their fear of change while embracing the growth it brought. The Pentari recognized their concern over individuality while celebrating the strength of their collective bonds. The Vorth evolution had backfired. In trying to use division against the Alliance, they had forced every species to confront and accept their internal conflicts. The shadow beings, absorbed and acknowledged, ceased to be weapons and became understanding. The cracks in the ground sealed, but not before one last figure emerged. Not a shadow this time, but a pure Vorth, one of the original entropy beings. But it moved differently, uncertainly. Lily approached it slowly, carefully. The assembled beings held their breath. "You've been watching us," she said. "For 10 years, hiding below, studying us. What have you learned?" The Vorth quivered, and then did something unprecedented. It spoke, not in harmonics or translated thoughts, but in broken attempted words. "You make things. We only unmake. You create light. We are absence. How do you bear it?" "Bear what?" Lily asked gently. "Existence. Being something instead of nothing. It is heavy." The assembly watched in stunned silence as this being of entropy, destroyer of worlds, struggled with the concept of existence itself. Lily glanced at her father, who nodded encouragingly. She turned back to the Vorth. "It is heavy sometimes, but we don't carry it alone. Would you like to try?" The impossible happened. A Vorth, a being of pure negation, attempted to create. It couldn't form light or matter, but it shaped its entropy into something almost like a hand, reaching out tentatively. Lily took it without hesitation. The touch should have unmade her, but instead, something else occurred. The Vorth solidified slightly, gaining definition, becoming less absence and more presence. "It hurts," the Vorth whispered. "Being is pain." "Sometimes," Lily agreed, "but it's also joy. Let us show you." The aftermath of the Shadow Crisis, as historians would name it, marked a turning point. The species that had considered leaving the Alliance instead renewed their commitment, having faced and accepted their fears. The youth who had stood together became symbols of what integration could achieve. And the Vorth? That single being became the first of its kind to choose existence over entropy. Others followed, slowly, painfully, learning to be rather than to unmake. It was a process that would take generations, but it had begun. Marcus found himself on the same observation deck weeks later, but now he wasn't alone. The council had expanded to include youth representatives, shadow integration specialists, and even a carefully monitored Vorth observer. "Still thinking?" Lily asked, joining him as she often did. "Always," Marcus replied, "but different thoughts now." Below them, Unity Point had evolved again. The architecture now included shadow spaces for processing dark reflections, entropy gardens where reformed Vorth learned to coexist with matter, and integration centers where the mirror events lessons were taught. "You know what Mom would say?" Lily mused. Marcus smiled. His wife had been gone for 15 years, but her influence lived on in their daughter. That we're all idiots for making things so complicated? "That too," Lily laughed, "but also that the best families are the ones you choose to build." Prism flowed up beside them, its movements easy and familiar after a decade of friendship. "The human concept of family remains fascinating," it harmonized. "We Korthax reproduce by division, creating exact copies. But this, choosing to bond with different beings, calling them family, it creates something new." "That's humanity's real strength," Marcus said. "Not our weapons or our stubbornness or even our ability to stand when we should run. It's our capacity to look at someone completely different and say, 'You're family now.'" A chime announced another arrival. The reformed Vorth, still struggling with physical form, but determined to try. It had chosen a name for itself, Hope. "The others wish to know," Hope said carefully, each word a struggle against its nature, "if beings of entropy can truly join your family." Marcus looked at this creature that had once been pure destruction, now fighting to exist, to belong, to be more than its origin. He thought of that night 10 years ago when he'd slapped an alien rather than let it threaten his daughter. He'd come so far from that moment of protective violence. "Family isn't about what you were," Marcus said finally. "It's about what you choose to become." and choosing to be better, to grow, to connect. That makes you family already. Hope's form solidified a bit more, almost resembling joy. As the twin suns set over Unity Point, 4 beings stood together: an aging human soldier, his artistic daughter, a crystalline alien scholar, and a reformed entity of destruction. Behind them, a city of impossible architecture housed dozens of species living in chaotic, beautiful harmony. It hadn't been easy. It wouldn't be easy going forward. There would be more crises, more challenges, more moments when walking away would be simpler than standing together. But that was the human way, the way that had become the galaxy's way. To stand when you should run, to reach out when you should retreat, to say "you're family now" to the universe itself. And it all started with a slap that became a handshake, a father's protection that became a galaxy's connection, and a soldier who chose to never walk away, not from his daughter, not from his unexpected alien family, and not from the impossible dream of unity among the stars. The story of Marcus Chen would be told for generations, interpreted differently by each species that heard it. But the heart remained the same. Sometimes the smallest gestures create the biggest changes. A slap, a handshake, a child's song, a choice to stand together. And in the end, that's what made humanity special among the stars. Not their technology or their warrior spirit, but their stubborn, impossible, beautiful insistence that different could mean stronger, that family was whoever you chose to stand beside, and that walking away was never an option when there was still hope for something better. The twin suns painted the sky in brilliant colors as they set, their light refracting through prisms formed to create rainbow patterns that danced across the observation deck. Somewhere in the city below, children of a dozen species played together, their laughter a harmony that no amount of entropy could silence. Marcus Chen, father and reluctant diplomat, guardian and bridge builder, smiled and held his family close, all of them in all their impossible diversity. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight they were together, and that was enough.